They tried to downplay him. They questioned his leadership. They said the spotlight was louder than the production. But today, Shedeur Sanders didn't answer with a press conference, a tweet, or a highlight reel. He answered with paperwork. And not the kind most rookies sign. This wasn't just another endorsement announcement buried in the news cycle. This was a line in the sand. Because while most young players are chasing their first big check, Shedeur did something that instantly separated him from everyone else in his draft class. He rejected the normal rules of the game. Imagine this for a second. You're a rookie. You haven't even completed a full NFL season. A brand slides a guaranteed 8-figure deal across the table. Life-changing money. The kind of number that secures your family forever. For 99% of players, the decision is automatic. Shedeur said no. Not because the money wasn't big enough, but because the structure was. Instead of taking the safe route, he pushed for something most athletes never even think to ask for: ownership. Not a face on a bottle, not a one-time check, a stake, equity, control, a long-term seat at the table. And that's when everything changed. Because once that detail leaked, the conversation around Shedeur shifted overnight. This wasn't just about football anymore. This was about power, about leverage, about a rookie quarterback moving like a CEO while the rest of the league was still playing employee. Fans were stunned, critics were furious, executives were caught off guard, and quietly, a lot of people in the sports world got nervous. Why? Because if this works, if a young player can turn attention into ownership, brand into equity, and pressure into leverage, then the entire endorsement model starts to crack. Teams lose control, brands lose leverage, and players stop waiting their turn. Shedeur didn't just sign a deal. He rewrote the script for how modern athletes can operate before they ever prove anything on Sundays. But here's the real question no one wants to ask out loud. Is this the smartest move we've ever seen from a rookie? Or the most dangerous gamble imaginable? Because with this kind of money, this much visibility, and this level of confidence, there's no room left to hide. And what happens next will decide whether Shedeur Sanders changed the game forever, or painted the biggest target the NFL has ever seen. Most rookies don't get leverage, they get opportunity. A locker, a playbook, and a quiet understanding that you prove yourself first and get rewarded later. That's how the system has always worked, which is exactly why this moment caught everyone off guard. When the offer came in, it looked like the dream scenario. A massive guaranteed endorsement package from Gatorade, the kind of deal athletes spend entire careers chasing. No performance triggers, no waiting period. Just a check that would instantly put him among the highest-paid rookies off the field. And according to reports, it wasn't a small number. We're talking life-altering money. The kind of offer agents beg their clients to accept. The kind of deal families tell you not to overthink. But that's where this story breaks from the script. Instead of asking how much, the conversation reportedly shifted to how. How long does this last? Who owns the upside? What happens after the cameras stop rolling? While most endorsement talks revolve around visibility and payment, this one veered into territory that makes executives uncomfortable: control and ownership. That's when the pause happened. Because cash is simple, cash is clean, cash is predictable, equity is not. Equity means belief. It means long-term commitment. It means betting that the brand will grow and that your presence will help grow it. That's not how rookie deals usually work, especially in the NFL, where players are expected to wait their turn. But the counter was firm. A traditional endorsement wasn't enough. A one-time payout didn't align with the vision. The ask wasn't for more money up front, it was for a piece of the future. That request alone reframed everything. Suddenly, this wasn't a rookie grateful to be included. This was a partner negotiating terms. And reportedly, that's where things got tense. Because brands aren't used to hearing no from players who haven't taken a snap yet. They're used to dictating structure, not defending it. Walking away from guaranteed money is easy to criticize. It sounds reckless, arrogant even, but there's another way to look at it. Turning down cash isn't confidence, it's conviction. And once that line was crossed, there was no going back to a normal deal. The conversation had shifted from endorsement to alignment, from payment to ownership. But that decision only makes sense if you understand one thing: most athletes learn too late. There's a difference between getting paid and building wealth. And that difference explains everything that came next. Here's the part most people miss when they hear about a rookie turning down guaranteed money. They assume it's ego, or bad advice, or someone getting ahead of themselves. But that reaction usually comes from confusing rich with wealthy, two words that look similar and operate very differently. Being rich is a moment, it's a deposit, a headline, a number that looks impressive on paper and shrinks the second taxes, fees, and time get involved. NFL history is full of players who made tens of millions and still watched it disappear. Cash feels powerful, but it's fragile. Spend it and it's gone. Stop earning and the clock starts ticking. Wealth doesn't work that way. Wealth is ownership. Wealth compounds. Wealth keeps paying even when you're not in the room. That's the distinction Shedeur Sanders was operating from when he pushed back on a standard deal. According to reports, the focus wasn't how much money came in today, it was how long the money could keep coming in tomorrow. That's why equity matters. When you own a percentage of something, you're no longer tied to appearances or campaigns. You're tied to growth. Every new product launch, every expansion, every increase in valuation benefits you automatically. You don't need to renegotiate. You don't need to stay relevant on social media. The asset works for you. This is the same principle that turned past athletes into lifelong earners, but with a modern twist. Previous generations fought for royalties. Shedeur is reportedly fighting for stakes. That's a subtle difference with massive implications. It also explains why this move made executives hesitate. Equity isn't just compensation. It's a vote of confidence. It means the brand believes not only in the athlete's image, but in his ability to elevate the business itself. That's a bigger bet than cutting a check. Critics say it's risky, and they're not wrong. Equity ties your reputation directly to the brand's future. If the company stumbles, so do you. If your image takes a hit, the partnership feels it instantly. There's no hiding behind a contract. But that's the trade-off. Instead of a finite payout, you're betting on scale. Instead of short-term safety, you're choosing long-term leverage. And instead of playing defense with your finances, you're playing offense. That's why this wasn't about turning down money. It was about refusing to cap the upside. And once you see it that way, the next move makes perfect sense. Because this mindset didn't stop with one deal. It carried straight into the most powerful contract of all. This is where the strategy stopped being theoretical and started looking surgical. Because while the equity conversation grabbed headlines, the real shockwave came from what was reportedly buried inside Nike's agreement with Shedeur Sanders. On the surface, the deal already looked massive. A rookie, not drafted at the very top, landing a contract valued in the 9 figures before establishing himself in the league. Critics called it reckless. They said Nike was paying for hype, not production, that the brand was gambling on a name instead of a resume. What they didn't realize was that the number everyone was debating wasn't even the final number. According to reports, embedded in the contract was an active player escalator, language that fundamentally altered the risk profile of the deal. The moment Shedeur officially participated in NFL activities as an active roster member, the value of the agreement would automatically increase. No renegotiation, no new signatures, just a trigger. And when that trigger hit, everything doubled. That's the part that reframed the entire conversation. This was Nike betting blindly. This was Nike structuring a deal that rewarded activation, visibility, and momentum. From the brand's perspective, it was controlled risk. From Shedeur's side, it was insulation. Because here's what most rookie endorsement deals don't protect against: football reality. Injuries happen, depth charts change, careers stall. Traditional contracts tie earnings directly to availability and relevance. This one didn't. Even if things went sideways on the field, the business foundation was already secured. That's not confidence, that's foresight. And it also explains why this deal caused such unease across the league. If a rookie can lock in quarterback-level money from a shoe company before his second contract, it disrupts the leverage teams usually hold. It changes negotiation dynamics. It alters timelines. It gives players options. That's dangerous for a system built on patience and hierarchy. Nike wasn't just buying performance. They were buying inevitability, visibility, conversation. The idea that whether Shedeur thrived or struggled, people would be watching. And attention in modern sports business is the real currency. This clause didn't just protect Shedeur from downside. It accelerated his upside. It turned participation into amplification and presence into profit. And once that framework was in place, the next step became obvious. Because if you're going to operate at this level, there's one thing you can't afford to lose: control. This is the part that separates clever deals from complete control. Because while the numbers grabbed attention, the real leverage came from something far less visible: ownership of identity. Most NFL players don't actually own themselves in the way fans assume. Their name, image, and likeness are often entangled in league rules, team approvals, and licensing structures. Want to launch a product? You need permission. Want to appear in a campaign? Lawyers get involved. Speed disappears. Leverage vanishes. That's the system Shedeur Sanders and his team refused to accept. According to reports, his path from college to the pros was structured so he retained full control over his image rights. Not partial, not conditional, full. That means when a brand calls, the answer doesn't go through layers of bureaucracy. It goes straight to negotiation. Faster deals, stronger terms, better positioning. This autonomy changes everything. Instead of being an asset owned by a franchise, Shedeur operates like a standalone company. He doesn't need the Cleveland Browns to greenlight partnerships. He doesn't need league approval to move quickly. He can align with brands on his timeline, not theirs. That's why the deal stacked up so fast. While other rookies are waiting for approvals and clearances, Shedeur is already signing. While agents for other players are still pitching, his brand is already active. This isn't about popularity, it's about velocity. The faster you can move, the more leverage you have. And brands noticed. When companies negotiate with him, they're not dealing with a temporary endorsement face. They're dealing with a decision maker, someone who understands metrics, audience overlap, and long-term value. That changes the tone in the room. It turns conversations into partnerships instead of pitches. Critics argue this level of control invites distraction, that it pulls focus away from football. But the counterargument is simple: stability off the field often creates clarity on it. When financial uncertainty disappears, performance pressure becomes more focused, not more chaotic. Owning the brand doesn't mean ignoring the game. It means protecting the future regardless of how the game unfolds. And that's what makes this approach so disruptive. It bypasses the traditional waiting period. It collapses the timeline. It allows a rookie to operate with veteran leverage before the league expects him to have it. But the ultimate test of any strategy isn't theory. It's results. And once the numbers started coming in, the argument shifted completely. Here, where the conversation stops being theoretical and starts getting uncomfortable for critics, because numbers don't care about opinions. While analysts debated draft position and hot takes flooded social media, the sales data quietly told a very different story. Jerseys were moving, fast, faster than anyone expected, not just among rookies but across the league. Fans weren't waiting for wins. They weren't waiting for highlight reels. They were buying into the identity. That's cultural gravity. When merchandise reports dropped, insiders noticed something wild. A rookie not taken at the top of the draft was outselling players with Super Bowl rings, outselling established stars, outselling entire position groups. And this wasn't tied to team success. It was tied to narrative. People weren't buying a logo, they were buying a story. This is what happens when an athlete builds a following before the league tells fans they're supposed to care. College audiences followed the journey. Social media amplified every moment. NIL laid the groundwork. By the time the NFL chapter began, the fan base was already locked in. And the kicker, every sale carried leverage. Because of how his deals were structured, jersey sales weren't just good PR. They were revenue streams that flowed directly back. While most players see only a fraction of that money, this model flipped the equation. Visibility became income. Attention became equity. Brands noticed immediately. Executives don't just look at touchdowns anymore. They look at conversion rates, engagement velocity, demographics, reach. When a player can move product without winning games, that's rare. When they can do it as a rookie, that's disruptive. That's why companies like Gatorade didn't just see an athlete, they saw a platform, a built-in audience that responds, buys, and shows up. That's not endorsement value, that's partnership value. And it explains why criticism didn't slow anything down. In fact, it accelerated it. Every debate clip, every viral argument, every "he's overhyped" comment fueled the algorithm. Attention multiplied, searches spiked, jerseys kept selling. Hate didn't hurt the brand, it fed it. That's the paradox most people miss. In today's economy, silence is the enemy. Polarization drives engagement. Engagement drives value, and value rewrites negotiating power. This wasn't accidental, it was engineered. By the time traditional media started asking, "How is this possible?" the answer was already obvious. The player wasn't chasing validation from the league. The league was catching up to the market. And once that shift happens, there's no rewind button. Because when culture moves first, the business always follows. There's a cost to moving this fast, a price that doesn't show up on contracts or balance sheets. The moment the numbers went public, the narrative flipped. This wasn't just a promising rookie anymore. This was a symbol, a lightning rod, a walking headline. And once that happens, there's no such thing as a quiet Sunday. Every throw gets dissected. Every mistake gets magnified. When expectations rise faster than on-field results, patience disappears. Fair or not, the conversation shifts from potential to judgment overnight. That's the invisible weight. When you secure generational money before proving anything in the standings, critics don't wait. They circle. They ask whether the focus is split. They question motives. They frame confidence as arrogance. And the louder the brand gets, the sharper the backlash becomes. This is the part most players never experience so early. Defenders aren't just trying to sack a quarterback anymore. They're trying to make a statement. There's extra intensity in every hit, extra trash talk in every pile, because taking down a highly paid, highly visible rookie carries bragging rights. And the media feeds on it. One bad game doesn't stay one bad game, it becomes a narrative, too focused on business, more CEO than quarterback, brand over football. Those labels stick quickly, especially when the money is already secured. That's the risk of flipping the traditional NFL timeline. Usually players struggle first, earn later. Here the order is reversed. Success is expected immediately. And when expectations aren't met, the reaction is brutal. But here's what often gets overlooked. Pressure doesn't break everyone. For some, it sharpens focus. There's a reason this approach isn't common. Most rookies aren't built for this level of scrutiny. They need validation. They need approval. They need time to grow without the microscope. This situation demands something different. It demands emotional insulation, a short memory, an ability to ignore noise without shrinking from responsibility. Because once you step into this lane, there's no hiding. You can't downplay expectations. You can't pretend the spotlight isn't there. Every move becomes part of the brand, for better or worse. That's why this phase matters more than the contracts, more than the headlines, because how a player responds now determines whether the story becomes cautionary or historic. And that's where everything tightens. Because the next chapter isn't about business moves or media reactions. It's about execution. And the league is watching closely. There has never been a rookie like this, not just because of talent or hype or lineage, but because of timing. This era is different. Social media never sleeps. Every snap becomes a clip. Every quote becomes a headline. Every facial expression turns into a debate. And when you mix that environment with massive money, public confidence, and unapologetic self-belief, the pressure multiplies into something the league has never truly seen before. This isn't the pressure of being drafted early. This is the pressure of redefining the system while still inside it. Most rookies are protected by expectations being low. They're allowed to struggle. Fans say, he's learning. Analysts say, give him time. That grace disappears when the business success arrives first. Now the margin for error shrinks. A missed read isn't just a missed read, it's proof to critics. A bad interception isn't just a mistake, it's framed as entitlement. And if the team loses, the conversation instantly shifts away from coaching, roster gaps, or protection issues and lands squarely on one name. That's a dangerous spotlight. Because this pressure isn't just external, it's internal too. When you bet on yourself at this scale, failure isn't an option, not emotionally, not reputationally, not financially. You're not just playing for wins anymore. You're playing to justify every decision you made off the field. And the league knows it. Defenses will test composure. They'll disguise coverages, bait throws, send pressure from unexpected angles, not just to win the game, but to see how the moment is handled. Because when the lights are brightest, hesitation shows. But here's the part that changes everything. This isn't unfamiliar territory. Long before the NFL, the spotlight was already there. College stadiums, transfer headlines, nil debates, constant comparisons. The pressure didn't arrive suddenly, it escalated gradually, layer by layer, season by season. That matters, because pressure breaks players who meet it all at once. It sharpens players who grow inside it. This situation isn't survivable with talent alone. It requires emotional discipline, routine, a refusal to chase validation or silence critics. It requires staying boring when chaos demands reaction. And that's the real test. Not the arm strength, not the decision-making, not even the wins. The real test is whether the noise becomes fuel or friction. Because from this point forward, nothing will be quiet. Every game adds weight. Every moment builds narrative. And there's no reset button. Only momentum. And what happens next decides whether this story becomes controversial or untouchable. What makes this moment so dangerous for the league isn't just one player's confidence or one contract's size. It's the blueprint quietly forming underneath it all. Because this isn't chaos, it's design. Every move points toward a long-term strategy that goes far beyond one season, one franchise, or one highlight reel. This is about control, about leverage, about shifting who holds power in a system that's been one-sided for decades. For years, the NFL has operated on a simple equation. Teams own the structure. Players operate inside it. Even superstars rarely dictate terms until they've already delivered championships. Rookies, especially, are expected to wait their turn. That expectation just got challenged. What's happening here signals to future prospects that the traditional path isn't the only one. That value doesn't have to be proven solely on Sundays. That influence, audience, and brand equity matter just as much as draft position. And that idea spreads fast. Front offices notice it, agents study it, sponsors adjust their strategies. College athletes start asking different questions, not how high will I be drafted, but how much control will I have? That's disruptive. Because once players understand their own leverage early, negotiations change, contracts change, endorsements change. The balance of power tilts even slightly away from ownership. And that makes people uncomfortable. Not because it's reckless, but because it's calculated. This approach forces organizations to adapt, to recognize that talent now arrives with its own ecosystem, its own audience, its own revenue streams. Teams can't just sell opportunity anymore. They have to offer alignment. That's a big shift. But here's the catch. Blueprints only matter if the execution holds. If the on-field product collapses, the strategy becomes a cautionary tale. If success follows, it becomes a model others will copy relentlessly. There's no middle ground. Either this changes how the league does business, or it becomes the example teams use to warn against ambition. That's the gamble. And it's why every throw matters now more than ever. Because the next generation is watching closely. Not just fans, not just analysts, but players who will soon demand the same autonomy, the same equity, the same voice. This isn't just a career unfolding. It's a system being tested in real time. And the result will ripple far beyond one locker room. This story was never just about money, or headlines, or shock value. It's about timing, leverage, and a mindset the league wasn't prepared for. What happened here forces a hard question the NFL can't ignore anymore. What happens when a player understands their value before the system tells them to? When confidence meets preparation? When branding meets production? When the traditional order gets flipped? That's why this moment feels uncomfortable to so many people. Not because it's reckless, but because it works. The next chapter won't be written in boardrooms or endorsement meetings. It'll be written on Sundays under pressure, with defenders closing fast and narratives waiting to pounce. Because once you bet this big on yourself, there's no room for hiding. Either the blueprint holds, or it collapses under its own weight. But one thing is already clear. The league is watching. Future players are learning. And the power dynamics have already shifted. Whether people love it or hate it, the door is open now. And it's not closing again.